Hi students, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu News Analysis for 6th of November 2018. So let's get started. So let's look into the first article. The first article says Iran oil, India, China get relief. So what is this article all about? In order to understand this, we will have to know a bit of a background. So the United States of America under the presidency of Donald Trump withdraws itself or pulls itself out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or what is called as the Iran deal. So what it further goes on to say is, due to its withdrawal, United States of America has put sanctions on Iran. So any other country, in case it has business deals or negotiations in terms of economics, then even such countries will be penalized, is what United States of America has said in reference to its deals with Iran. As a result of this statement, more than 20 countries have decreased their imports of Iranian crude. At the same time, the European Union, which was also part of this Iran deal, has stayed with the deal, is now frustrated. Why? Because there could be implications that the European Union would also face, because there would be certain penalizing actions that can be initiated by the USA. Apart from this, there is one of the international organizations called as SWIFT. This SWIFT, which is headquartered in Belgium, is an international finance messaging service, and this organization has further gone on to say, when there are countries which are facing the sanctions, when there are European companies which are facing sanctions, we cannot be away from it. So even we would endorse the same thing, and we would not continue our relationship or any of the economic negotiations with Iran. So as a result of this order by the United States of America, every country and most of the countries including India have faced certain economic problems. So in order to understand the entire concept, the entire video of what this Iranian deal is, we have already uploaded a video. Kindly look into it. But what we will be discussing is in reference to this problem that could have arisen. So what are the problems that could have arisen for India? One of the basic things that we have to understand is India is an energy deficit country, and 80% of its oil imports are from other countries, and India, being energy deficit, gets about 80% of its oil from important countries, and 10% of it is from Iran. So majority of it, let's say for example Saudi Arabia, Iraq and Iran currently occupies the third position, and it sends or exports almost about 10% of India's imports. So if this sanction is implicated on India, India would face a lot of problem when it comes to its import of the oil. So in order to address certain key issues like this, what United States of America has come up with is, it has made sure that it has given temporary relief for India along with 8 other countries. So what are the 8 other countries that we are speaking about? It includes China, India, Greece, Italy, Taiwan, Japan, Turkey and South Korea. So what United States of America has done is, they have told all these countries that you would be able to import oil from Iran, and at the same time it does not put across any of the timelines for the same, and at the same time the waiver, it is said, is temporary, and there has been no time limit that has been announced as of now. So the United States of America can reverse its stance, and it can further penalize the countries, but as of now what we have to understand is, it has given temporary relief. One of the basic ideas that we also have to understand is, why did United States of America come up with this move? For this, what we have to understand is, there are 2 important objectives. So what are these 2 important objectives? One is in terms of the nuclear missiles, the other is in terms of the influence. So when it comes to the nuclear program, what United States of America feels is that the Iran's nuclear program has to be curbed, it has to be reduced, it has to be completely neglected and removed from the world order. So in order to make sure that this nuclear program is curbed, that is why United States of America has pulled itself out of the Iranian deal. And at the same time, what it also feels is that Iran is increasing its influence in the Middle East, and majority of its economy is based on oil. In case we can curb this oil export, then the influence of Iran can be curbed, and the influence of Iran can be lowered down in this region of Middle East. So why Iran was sanctioned? Why why USA initiated this process is on two objectives. One is to curb the nuclear missile program, the other is to reduce the influence of Iran in the Middle East. So this is all we have to know in reference to this article, but for the entire video we have already uploaded one on the YouTube channel, so kindly go through that video. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says India declares nuclear triad operational. So what is the context? So when we look into the context, it says that India on Monday declared that its nuclear triad stated in its nuclear doctrine is operational after indigenous ballistic missile nuclear submarine INS Arihant achieved a milestone by conducting its first deterrence patrol. So the first question that pops up is, what is this nuclear triad? So when we say nuclear triad, it basically means we have the nuclear warheads if it can be delivered by three means, that is from the ground, then from the air, as well as from the water, then such country can call itself a nuclear triad. So let us take the example and try to understand what this nuclear triad is all about. So when we look into the Indian context, what we have is the ground-based nuclear program. So this ground-based nuclear program includes the Prithvi, the Agni, and so on. So India has the Agni, so we have the ground-based nuclear missiles, and then we also have the air-based nuclear missiles, and this include, say for example, the Su-30. So the Sukhoi 30 fighter jets can be accommodated with the nuclear missiles, so India also has the air mission in this case, and what we also need is a water based, and for which what we have is the Arihant. So what this nuclear triad is all about? So the nuclear triad is all about having the nuclear arsenals being delivered from the ground, the air, as well as water bodies. So this is what the nuclear triad is, and what we have to understand is what is the merits of this. So why does India need the nuclear triad? Let's take for example, there is one of the enemy countries, and when the enemy countries is always wanting to bombard one of the home countries, what you need is a nuclear architecture, and in this nuclear architecture you have the ground, the air, as well as water. Let's take for example, they go on to dismantle the nuclear architecture based on the ground as well as the air. So what can act as a deterrent right now is the water based. So India has made sure, even if its entire nuclear architecture involving the ground as well as the air is neutralized, what we have is the water, which can act as a deterrent. So basically this nuclear triad is one of those options which will help in advancing the deterrence of nuclear program, and once it's neutralized, that is the ground as well as the air system is neutralized, what India or any other country would use is the water based system, so that it can annihilate that country which has attacked its home country. So the advantage of this is we would be able to respond swiftly through the other means, that is by the water, by using the INS Arihant, which is one of the water-based nuclear missile system. And apart from this, what this article goes on to say is it speaks about the INS Arihant. So what is this INS Arihant? So this is one of the important strategic assets that India has built indigenously, which is a ballistic missile nuclear submarine, and this was developed decades ago under the ATV program. So what is this ATV program? So this ATV program is nothing but the Advanced Technology Vessel program, and this comes directly under the Nuclear Command Authority, and this is headed by Prime Minister. So this ATV program, which is under the Nuclear Command Authority headed by the Prime Minister, can initiate the move in case there is any neutralization that happens on the ground as well as the air level. What we also have to understand is, apart from India, there are many other countries which also host the nuclear triad. Let's take for example the United States of America. So the United States of America has about 70 water-based submarines, and when we look at Russia, it is holding a second place, and it almost has about 30. And there are also the other superpowers. Let's take for example the France, which currently has about 10, and then you have the United Kingdom, which has about 12, and China's number we are not sure because different articles give different numbers, but they do have their own arsenal as well. So apart from the superpowers that we have, India is one of the first countries to have taken up this INS Arihant, that is the submarine based water level. What we also have to understand in this case is these can be operated in vast expanses of the ocean. As we have already discussed, this can act as the third deterrent in case our ground as well as the air system is completely neutralized. So what it means is that India would be able to hide the ballistic missiles at the sea for a longer period of time and hit back the enemy from the sea, which can be a most important deterrent factor in the nuclear program. So because these submarines are also less susceptible and less vulnerable to the attacks by the enemy, because they would not be able to figure out where these submarines are located, this is also one of the safest ploys that India has taken to make sure that it is becoming a part of the nuclear triad, which also includes the superpowers. So this is all we have to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the important article, that is preserving the taboo. So what is this article all about? So what we are discussing in this article is about the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. So this treaty is one of the arms control agreement that was signed between the United States of America as well as the Soviet Union, where they wanted to eliminate and permanently make sure that they are renouncing the nuclear and the conventional ground-based ballistic as well as the cruise missiles that were in the range of 500 to 5500 kilometer. So what is of importance to us is that this is only for the ground based one and it is not for the sea based launches. So this agreement, which was signed in the year 1987, was signed between US President Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, the last Soviet leader. So what this led to is that this was the first time that the bipolar world, where you had two superpowers, the United States of America and the Soviet Union, came up together and they had agreed on certain terms and conditions to reduce their nuclear arsenals, eliminate an entire category of nuclear weapons, and even provide options of extensive on-site inspections for their verifications. This ultimately led to United States of America destroying 846 Pershing IIs as well as the ground launch cruise missiles, and the Soviet Union even destroying 1846 missiles along with its support facilities. But why are we discussing this article? It is because the US President Donald Trump announced recently that he was withdrawing US from this treaty of INF. Why did Trump administration go about doing it? That is because they felt that Russia was non-compliant to this treaty and have been misutilizing this treaty, and that is why we are withdrawing from this treaty. So even before we understand this article in detail, what we have to understand is a bit of a background. So what does the background say? So when you look into this treaty was signed in the year 1987 by US President Ronald Reagan as well as the Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev. And this particular treaty was signed in the era where there was only bipolar entities. So what are these bipolar entities? You have United States of America on one side, you have the Soviet Union on the other side. So the world was ruled by these two superpowers. So what we have to understand is there was a bipolar world, and this was in the Cold Era where these two countries were dominating the world order. And in this pretext, what we see is if these two countries could sign a particular treaty, then the world would settle down all nuclear ammunitions as well as nuclear proliferation. But what we also have to understand in this case is that Europe played a most important part. So both these countries were increasing their nuclear arsenal power. So when you look into the number of statistics, what you will realize is that there were about 40,000 nuclear weapons that Soviet Union had, which was far exceeding the United States of America. So there was a constant war to increase the nuclear arsenal missiles. So in this backdrop, one casualty that you could see is the Europeans. So the Europe in this case sensed a grave threat to its existence. It felt that it would be a casualty. So it felt that it would lose a number of lives because both United States of America as well as Soviet Union was fighting on its soil. So because Europe felt that they were fighting on their soil, they had to renegotiate certain terms. So in order to make sure that Europeans' voice is heard, in order to make sure that Europe's casualty is less, and in order to make sure that Europe does not be an implication because of United States of America and USSR, and does not lose life because of the war between these two superpowers, what these two countries came about was negotiating certain other terms. So in 1980, what you will basically go on to see is that United States of America and USSR began three sets of parallel negotiations. So what are these negotiations? On the strategic weapons leading to Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, that is the START program, on the intermediate range weapons leading to the INF, and then what we also see is the nuclear and the space talks. So because Russia and United States of America were increasing its nuclear arsenal, what Europe sensed was that it could be a victim of its own success. That is, it could be a victim of its closeness to United States of America as well as its disassociation with Russia, that is the Soviet Union. As a result, it has to negotiate its terms and make sure that USA as well as USSR enter into number of treaties that we just discussed. And all this was happening in the Cold War era, and when it is in Cold War era, it means only the United States of America or the Soviet Union were the major powers, and other countries did not have much of hold. But what we see currently is there is a changing political backdrop. So what is the political backdrop that we are speaking about? One of the key important terms that we have to consider is the nuclear posture review. So what is this nuclear posture review? So this was one of the charters that the United States of America initiated in the 1993. So this nuclear posture review is one of those security protocols that US initiates annually to look at the role of the nuclear weapons in the US security strategy. So what it basically means is it look into its nuclear options, whether the nuclear options has to be enhanced or it has to be diminished. So recently the United States of America has again done a review, and this 2018 nuclear posture review has made sure that it is more aggressive in pattern. Why has it become more aggressive? It is because of certain reasons. The first important point is in reference to Russia. So what is this? One, the United States of America feels it is not compliant to the INF, and at the same time it is planning to break its partnership in the NATO, and at the same time it is creating a lot of chaos and disturbance in the Middle East. So because Russia is creating a lot of trouble to the United States of America by breaking its NATO partners, by interfering constantly in the Middle East, and at the same time not compliant to international treaties, that is why United States of America feels that its nuclear posture review has to change and it has to be aggressive. And at the same time what it also feels is there is another country, China, which is posturing itself as a dominant and against United States of America in the Indo-Pacific region. So because you have two fronts, Russia and China, trying to dominate and outwit United States of America, so United States of America feels that this is no more a bipolar world where it contested once with the Soviet Union, now it is contesting with Russia as well as China for hegemony and dominance. And at the same time what we also need to understand is there are major other global powers right now. So it is not only a Cold War era where you had United States of America and Soviet Union which were fighting and increasing the nuclear arsenal, but currently what we also have a n number of combinations. So what are the n number of combinations that we are speaking about? Like United States of America and Russia, you have the US China, you have US North Korea, you have India Pakistan as well as India China. So back then when 1987 when this treaty was signed, what you had was only certain animosity and hatred between two superpowers, two major world powers, and what we see is there is no bipolar world, what we see is a multipolar world. And in this multipolar world, USA and Russia should not alone initiate this process. This will also have to involve all other countries currently having the nuclear arsenal. And at the same time what this also currently goes on to speak is it also speaks about one of the important programs, and that is the non-proliferation treaty. So this non-proliferation treaty currently houses only 5 permanent members. It does not include India, Pakistan, North Korea as well as Israel. So what this article goes on to speak is, when you had non-proliferation treaty, you had only 5 superpowers. This has to be currently accommodated by including all these 4 countries, or you're supposed to make a nuclear global disarmament. Either include these countries or make sure you have a global disarmament. In case you cannot go ahead with this, what it goes on to say is, we are bound to see more of the INF type of retractions. Further, what could be the implications? So when we look into the implications, because of US withdrawal from this, because they feel Russia is non-compliant by it, what we will see is a trigger in the nuclear arms race. More countries will now want to expand its nuclear arsenal. You will see more number of non-European countries coming up to this reach. Currently we have 4 nuclear powers like India, Israel, Pakistan as well as North Korea. You will see more number of countries raising up to this. So the first implication would be, this will trigger a new nuclear arms race in Europe as well as other countries. And apart from this, there are also concerns that this treaty could mark the beginning of new arms race when it comes to Russia as well as United States of America. And at the same time, what we will also see is China becoming more dominant over Indo-Pacific region. There could be certain clashes that we will see in United States of America as well as China. And apart from this, the new casualty to this will be the new treaty, that is the New START agreement. So this was supposed to lapse in the year 2021, and this will require a negotiation and signing of agreement in the next 5 years. If this is not signed, what we will also see is, just like the INF, what we will also see is the New START treaty completely getting destroyed. So these are the possible implications that we need to understand. So what is the conclusion? So when we look into the conclusion, what we have to understand is, back then in the 1980s and 1990s, what we see is use of nuclear weapons, nuclear arsenals or warheads was seen as a taboo. It was seen as a prohibition. It was seen as a restriction. So the same thing has to further continue. But this will not only include Russia as well as United States of America, but this should also see the new global order. So the new global order that the article speaks about is, it not only includes USA as well as Russia, but it also has to include the current realities, which involves China, Pakistan, India, North Korea and all those countries which currently have the nuclear arsenal. So what this article beautifully goes on to say is, we have to acknowledge that this is not a bipolar world. This is no more dominated by United States of America and Soviet Union or currently Russia, but it has been one where you have multipolar world containing all these important countries. So in case you have to continue this taboo, that is not using the nuclear weapon, this should also be reverberating or resonating with all these other countries. So this is what this article goes on to speak about. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says, no respite for poverty for Muslims. So what is this article all about? So when we look into this article, there was one of the NSSO survey, that is 68th round, that is of 2011 and 12, which provides certain estimates of education levels as well as the job market indicators across various religious communities in India. So it has seen whether the communities, various religion communities like the Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Parsis, the Christians and so on, what is the level of employability, what is the poverty level, what is the education level. And what this article says is that we have to bring about certain reforms, especially in reference to the Muslim community. Why? Because they are comparatively poor and at the same time their educational levels are comparatively less. So let's look at what these article says in terms of the statistics first, and then the way ahead that we will have to take care. So the first point that it goes on to make is, it gives us certain statistics. So what are these statistics? In terms of the educational attainment in urban areas, the number of Muslim postgraduates, that is people who have a master's degree, is as low as 15 per 1,000 people, and this is further lower for the women as well. But when you consider the other communities, they are comparatively placed much above. And at the same time, the number of male graduates among Muslims is 71 per 1,000, that is those having the bachelor's degree. So earlier what we see is the master's degree, and currently finally what we see is the bachelor's degree. So even in the bachelor's degree, it is completely abysmal and low, and that is as low as 71 per thousand. This article further says around half the Muslim population over 15 years is either illiterate or has only primary or middle school education. So the number of illiterate people is highest among the Muslims, that is 190 per thousand, followed by Hindus, which is 84, Sikhs and Christians. So it has given number of relevant statistics, and the most important statistics that it further goes on to speak is in terms of the attendance rate. So what does it say? So it says for all those males of 5 to 14 years in the urban areas, attending the educational institutions is as low as 869 per thousand persons, while it is higher for the Christians amounting to 981, which is followed by the Sikhs at 971, and it is lower even for the Hindus at about 955. But the ones which are lowerly placed are the Muslims. So what this article goes on to say is that there are certain concerns it voices. So what are the concerns? So the first point that it goes on to say is these people are less educated. So the minute they are less educated, what you see is the number of employment schemes that these people would be able to endorse themselves will again be less. So because they have less education, because they have less number of skills in this global market where education is one of the most important points, they are not able to get the jobs, and because they are not able to get jobs, they are trapped in the vicious cycle of poverty. So ultimately what is happening is, because they are less educated, they do not have much of the skill set, which is what the market expects, and because they have less skills, what you will see is ultimately they are trapped in the cloud of poverty. The next point that it goes on to speak is about the labor force participation rate. So what is this labor force participation rate? It is defined as the number of persons either employed or seeking jobs. So what we have to understand is all those people who are already employed, let's say for example they are already working in one of the companies, in a formal set of companies, or they are seeking for jobs. In case I'm looking for jobs, that I'm looking for job to work in a formal organization, these people, that is those who are already employed or those seeking for work, that is I've applied for job, I'm looking for job, such people will be coming under the labor force participation rate. So kindly remember, it can be a prospective question in your prelims examination. So this labor force participation rate includes not only those people who are employed, but those even looking for these type of jobs. So what this concern that has been raised by this article is, even the labor force participation rate for the Muslims have comparatively reduced over a period of time. So this is indirectly supposed to be in reference to the education. So because they do not have the required amount of educational attainment, because of the quality of education that they've got is less, they are not able to employ themselves in the market. And at the same time, what this article goes on to further speaks is about the worker population ratio. So this worker population ratio is defined as the number of persons employed per thousand persons is also lowest among the Muslims. So what does this article say? Because they are less educated, because their labor force participation rate is less, because their worker population is less, what we need is certain reforms. So what are these reforms that the article is speaking about? One of the basic reforms that the article goes on to speak is that we need to provide them special incentives. So what are these special incentives that we are speaking about? Let us look into one of the statistical evidence. So when we look into the statistical evidence, the 71st NSO survey on education, the average fee for the college degrees in technical courses in government and private unaided institutions was about 25,000 as well as 64,000. So this they are not able to afford. Why? Because they are comparatively poor. So because they are comparatively poor, what the government has to initiate in this case is they'll have to provide certain incentives or certain subsidies so that all these Muslim illiterate people who are not able to study would be provided certain subsidies so they can take forward the higher education. And the next important point that we have to consider is, let's take for example they are not able to study. So in this case what we need to provide them is certain occasional skills. So in case we are able to provide them all these skill set, they would be more employable and they would be coming out of this poverty line. And the third important point is, the government has already initiated a number of schemes. Let's take for example Manas, or let's say Nayi Manzil or Pado Pardesh. So the government has initiated all these schemes like the Manas, the Nai Manzil, the Pado Pardesh, but the problem is people are generally not aware of it. So what this article goes on to say is make sure that you also have a information outreach. So you make sure there is an awareness program. All these important programs that the government has taken is fair and well and good, but the problem is the outreach. In case the people are aware of these programs, in case they get to know how to use these programs, then what we will see is more number of Muslims become literate, and then they can escape themselves from the bed of poverty. So this is what this article goes on to speak about. So the next article says ozone layer is recovering, says the UN. Let's look into the background first. So what does the background say? Scientists discovered that ozone layer, particularly over the Antarctic region and as far as Australia, had depleted in the year 1970s as well as the 80s. One such place was called as the Punta Arenas. So this is in the region of Chile. So this was one of the populated states in the region of Chile, and what this place encountered was those people exposed to the UV radiations had certain skill ailments, and even people started suffering from skin cancer. When scientists started looking as to why there was this constant skin exposure as well as skin cancer, what they discovered was there was constant ozone hole depletion, or what is called as ozone hole, which was happening in the southern hemisphere, especially in the region of Antarctica. So what is this ozone? So this ozone is a layer that is there in the atmosphere which sits at about 10 kilometers, and what does it do? It prevents all the ultraviolet radiations, that is the harmful ultraviolet radiations, from reaching the earth. In case this ultraviolet radiations hit the humans, what we will see is number of skin ailments as well as likelihood of the cancer. So what was happening in this region of Antarctica was that there was large scale ozone hole depletion, and that is why people started sensing certain skin irritation as well as skin cancer. So what we see over a period of time is that various agreements were signed, and one such agreement was signed in the year 1987, and this was to do with the Montreal Protocol. So what this Montreal Protocol did was, in order to prevent the damage that these ultraviolet radiations were causing on the humans as well as on the other animal kingdom, they made sure in order to control the damage they had to come up with certain important moves, and one such move was to banning of the ozone depleting chemicals, which included chlorofluorocarbons, which were once used in refrigerators and spray cans. So what this article goes on to say is that this ozone layer that shields the life from the cancer causing solar cells is recovering at a rate of 1 to 3% per decade, reversing years of dangerous depletion that has caused by the release of harmful chemicals. It further goes on to say the Antarctic zone hole is recovering while continuing to occur every year as a result of the Montreal Protocol. So all these things that the people were started facing in the Antarctic region, the Punta Arenas as well as in and around Antarctica, is comparatively reduced. Why? Because of the Montreal Protocol. So what the scientists and the United States currently go on to say is that the ozone layer is completely recovering at the rate of 3% per decade, and then further what we will see is this would have completely, or at least to a certain extent, would have recovered in the northern hemisphere by 2030 and in the southern hemisphere by 2060. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this. Let's look into some of the prelims practice questions. The formation of ozone hole in the Antarctic region has been a cause of concern. What could be the reason for the formation of this hole? It is the presence of permanent polar front as well as the stratospheric clouds and inflow of chlorofluorocarbons. The next question is, consider the following statement: chlorofluorocarbons known as ocean depleting substances are used in the correct answer for this is 1, 3 and 4 only. So moving on, let's look into the next question. In reference to the Asian highway network, which of the following statements are correct? So the correct answer for this is 1 and 3 only, because it connects Istanbul to Seoul only, is wrong because it also connects Japan. So this is with respect to the prelims practice questions. So moving on, let's look into the main space questions. It says the USA withdrawal from INF creates more paradoxes and confusions over nuclear disarmament. What are the possible implications and how should this be addressed? So we have already discussed this in terms of editorial. So kindly write all your answers on the comment section so that we can evaluate and give you the relevant feedback for the same. So this is it for today. Thank you so much. All the best.